is still part of that same section. It says, then she gave the king 120 talents of gold and a very large amount of balsam oil and precious stones. Never again did such a large quantity of balsam oil come in as that which the Queen of Sheba gave King Solomon. So obviously it was a large amount. I think it's just interesting. And that word for balsam oil is also just a general word for spices in general. And so we talked about that. You know, she comes from a region that's rich in spices and skilled in the processing of spices. And they were closer to India. So they probably learned and got some of those things from India, which India has always been famous for spices. And so it's just rad that, you know, on top of the gold she also brought some of that garlic salt, that tahini, the sriracha, the cholula, all the good stuff. And it's just cool because, like, in the ancient world, those things were worth like gold. Certain oils and herbs and things you know, people would trade large amounts of gold to get those things that we take for granted. Again, you know, there was a sriracha shortage, and again, I'm a Cholula guy, so it didn't bother me. But for those of you guys that didn't have your Cholula, I mean your sriracha, you were probably kind of sad, and you'd be willing to pay a little more to get some. But again, in the ancient world, when everything didn't really have much flavor, like, you were stoked to have salt, and then on top of that, you might have something else. But like India, they made most of their riches in the ancient world just by trading spices, which is just crazy to think about. Anybody know about the Middle Eastern group, ancient group called the Nabateans? So they were pretty much the OG doTERRA specialists back in the day, and they specialized in trading frankincense, and they figured out how to grow and procure it and extract the oils from it and everything, and then, you know, and so they became so wealthy because of all the healing properties of frankincense, and it smells good and all these things. They built this kingdom out in the wilderness, which today is called Petra, and they pretty much had so much money that they could just create this oasis in the desert, and they were able to pay people to carve their houses from stone, like in the cliffs. And so if you've seen Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, that's the one that takes place. Part of it takes place in Petra, and it's in modern day Jordan. And anyway, super cool place. It's even mentioned in Bible prophecy too. But that exists just because of their spice trade with frankincense, which is crazy. So again, ancient world, if you could find a spice or an oil or something that was highly sought after, you'd be set for life. And she gave him one of their specialties was this, you know, balsam oil. And then it says that verse 11, in the ships of Hiram as well, which brought gold from Ophir, brought in from Ophir a very great number of almug trees and precious stones. The king made from the almug trees supports for the house of the Lord and for the king's house, and lyres and harps for the singers. Such almug trees have not come in again, nor have they been seen to this day. So obviously it was the kind of wood that you were really looking for to make your instruments. And King Solomon granted the Queen of Sheba everything she desired, whatever she requested, besides what he gave her in proportion to his royal bounty. Then she departed and went to her own land together with her servants. So he gave her according to his royal bounty. So to give according to the royal bounty means to give a lot. Because it's like, you know, in proportion to your wealth, when you give a gift, it's going to reflect that, right? If you got a gift from me today that was well thought out, it might be decent. If you got a gift from me in my teens or 20s, it came from the dollar store. And so, like, it has to do in proportion to what you're able to do. And so when we're talking about a king, we're talking about high quality gifts. And so, and this is kind of a high key the measure of God's generosity towards us too. Can I get somebody to read Philippians 4:19 for us?
I'll do it.
All right, Adon. This is just, to me, just really kind of fits with this idea of like a royal bounty kind of gift. Aw, brothers. Cute.
I know we haven't seen each other all day.
Aw,
Couple
Cute.
days.
aw.
Couple days.
The girls are a little weirded out, but it's fine.
Don't remember.
It's
419.
awesome.
Okay.
All right, nice and loud. Philippians 4:19.
And my God shall supply all your need according to his riches in glory by Jesus Christ.
So hear that. This is Paul saying to the church in Philippi, my God will supply all of your needs according to his riches in glory. So, keyword is needs, because a lot of us are like, come on, lottery, right? And stop praying for that, seriously. But your needs, you need things that are worth way more than millions of dollars. You need character. And seriously, you all especially. No, I'm just kidding. But no, that's me for real. But we need character. We need to become more like Christ. And that is worth more than anything else, because that's the kind of stuff that will last forever. Where again, money won't. Not even gold, most precious metal that we have as humans, it's not going to last into the next life. At least, like, you can't take it. The streets are made of gold, and there's like a sea of glass that's basically pure gold. And gold's going to be the asphalt of heaven, right? There's going to be chunks of it laying on the side of the road, and nobody's going to pick it up. There's going to be like, oh, I tripped on this piece of dirt, and it's gold, right? So the real currency of the new kingdom is going to be Christ, because he's the focus. So if you want to be greedy, get as much Christ in this life as possible. Get as much Jesus as possible. Become as much like him as possible. That's the new greed for Christians. And God will provide everything that you need according to those riches. Those riches. And again, God's like, you guys think gold is cool, but I'm going to make it one of the most worthless objects in the new kingdom, in a sense, in a way. And so, and again, it's a couple $1,000s an ounce right now, right? Like $2,020 an ounce or something.
So you could say Jesus loved the hell out of us.
Yeah. Cute.
That was appropriate.
Only because I had to swallow and take a drink that I let you get any attention for that.
There it is. It's
Look how disappointed your dad is.
$2,030.89.
Okay, I was off by $10.89. But yeah, that's crazy how much it is right now. That's crazy. So anyway, back to Queen of Sheba. According to some traditions and myths, the Queen of Sheba wanted a son by Solomon. And he obliged her, according to the tradition and myth, right? Her child was named Menelik, and he became the ancestor of all Ethiopian kings after. But again, that's just a tradition and a myth. It's an old Jewish tradition. And also kind of rolls with an old Ethiopian tradition. So, I don't know. We know later in life, Solomon definitely would have obliged her. I don't know if at this point in his life that he was down for that. But once he had about 1,000 wives, he probably, wouldn't have been that hard to get with the guy. Ew. But anyway, just an interesting little side note. Verse 14. Now, the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold. Besides that from the traders and the wares of the merchants and all the kings of the Arabs and the governors of the country. So that's just his yearly wage. 666 talents of gold. Before we talk about the number, you guys are all excited about that. This was a crazy amount of gold, okay? This amounts to 25 tons of gold that comes to Solomon every year. 25 tons. So, according to the value that I looked up, which was $2,020, so it'll be even more than this, it would be you guys ready for this? $1,625,000,000 for his yearly income. And that's just as king. That's not even all the business ventures that it's talking about, which is probably 2 to 3 times that. Okay. What's that?
He wasn't even a Democrat.
Right, right. And not everybody knows what that means, but anyway, but we're talking like Jeff Bezos would have tried to get Solomon to invest in his early idea of Amazon.com, which happened in the 90s. I remember being on a Bible website in the early 2000s, and there was a little cheesy like GIF for Amazon.com for all your book needs, you know?
Mhm.
And I can remember that, which makes me super old. And then now it's like, you know, along with Walmart, they're trying to take over the world. And so, but this is the level that he was. And again, that's per year just for being king. So imagine like at the end of his reign, the amount of money he had. And then again, this is on top of everything else. And it's not, this is interesting, not just because of the crazy wealth of Solomon, but it also makes him the only other person in the Bible associated with the number 666. What are your thoughts about that before I share you mine? So there's only one other person in Revelation associated with the number 666 other than Solomon. What do you think? Yeah.
Isn't it when it refers to the 666 in Revelation? Doesn't it refer to that number as the number of man?
Mhm. It always gets misdirected and connected to Satan.
Right.
But it says it clearly in Revelation. This is the number of man, and the number is
Meaning not God, but man. Yeah.
yeah.
Not the things of God, but the things
Yeah.
of the flesh.
And in the biblical times, the largest measurement in weight was a talent, or we have a ton. And so, you know, that's why talents are used. So the 666 talents of gold a year, 25 tons. But any other thoughts on the idea of Solomon being one of only two people associated with the number 666? The love of, not money itself, but the love
Oh, the
of, I'm
love of
sure.
money.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the other biblical connection to 666 is the end times world dictator, an opponent of God, and God's people often know this person as the Antichrist. Okay, Revelation 13:18, by the way. In fact, the Revelation passage specifically says that the number 666 is the number of a man, and maybe it's a reference to Solomon. And not saying that Solomon was the Antichrist or that the coming Antichrist will be some kind of weird reincarnation of Solomon, but maybe it's that the Antichrist may not be someone purely evil from the beginning, but someone like Solomon who is a good man eventually corrupted.
Interesting.
Just a possibility, right? Who knows? Who knows? But it definitely is tied in this book to wealth and money and power. And we estimate Solomon was the richest king to ever live in the ancient world, ever. Before the age of billionaires like we've had in modern years. Yes, Julie?
Well, in today's society, I mean, that's what most people relate to
Right?
nowadays, and that's what they kind of have their eyes set on is money, 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 more and more and more, greed, greed.
Right.
I mean, and if you think about it, even though things look different, it's not much different than in Solomon's days. And I think that the Antichrist people think, oh, that's evil, that's Satan, but because Satan, the devil, is Antichrist.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, like, the Antichrist is not going to come across as like, you know, big red horns. He's going to come across as relating to people on their level in this day and age, and that's how he's going to deceive us is
Right.
by relating to you. How else would you fall down and worship a man? He's not going to force you to. Well, he will eventually force you once he has you in your. Has those in his hand.
Mhm.
Is first he's going to entice you with things that you love.
Right.
You know, which is the love of money and the love of yourself, and make you want those things. He's gonna like come across as charming and, you know, create peace, you know, all those things, and the
Mhm.
love of money, the love of yourself, you know what I mean, like man.
Yeah.
You know?
Totally. Yeah. So then it says again, in addition to that amount of money, besides that from the traveling merchants and all these other things, so the 666 talents of gold a year is just his like starting wage, like just his beginning salary. It's just wild. And I don't know, it's interesting. First Kings gives kind of a warning signal here. It assumes that we know the instructions for future kings of Israel in Deuteronomy 17. Because anybody reading here in scripture in the ancient world would have already read through the rest of it before in the book of Genesis and then Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy 17, verses 14 to 20 give instructions for Israel's kings. And so the writer here assumes we know verse 17 of that passage, which says, nor shall he greatly multiply silver and gold for himself. About a king, right? Now, God blessed Solomon with great riches, but I think Solomon eventually allowed that blessing to turn into danger because he let himself get paid so much for so long. I think that's where we see some of the danger. Because for me, like I've got a lot of like weird interests and hobbies that'll just pop up all of a sudden. And if I had more money, I would waste so much money on some of these things. You know what I mean? Like it's just another reason why God has never made me a millionaire, because he knows that I would not do well with it. And I would spend so much money on weird, nerdy stuff, right? And
Hair implants.
what's that?
Hair implants.
No, I would not. I've gotten to where I could afford. I don't want that. When you have a perfect head, why do you want hair to like cloud the vision? But anyway, but anyway, it's just crazy because you know Solomon, he didn't ask for the wealth, right? So that's where he gets some points. But he did and could control how much he received. He could have said, no, let's send that to this, let's do this, let's bless these poor nations. I mean, there's a lot of things he could have done. He chose not to. He just accepted it. Verse 16 goes on. King Solomon made 200 large shields of beaten gold, using 600 shekels of gold on each large shield. One really cool thing about gold, one of the most amazing properties after its inability to corrupt, it doesn't rust, it doesn't tarnish, right? There's only certain really strong acids that can even do anything to gold. It's a very amazingly pure metal. You can take things that were made out of gold 2,000 years ago, dig them up out of the ground, they're going to be just as shiny as they were when they were new. It's the crazy thing about gold. Or if something silver, it'd be like black, and you'd have to like clean it, and then you would see underneath it was silver. And so, but the second most amazing quality is its malleability. You can mash gold so thin that it becomes clear, but still connected, down to microns. It's insane. And that's one of the most amazing things about gold is that its malleability. You can beat it into any shape. You can smash it, smush it, move it all directions. It's also very easily scratched because it's so soft. But the fact that it maintains connection, even being spread out so thin, again, microns thick. At that point, it becomes semi-transparent, which is just wild to think about. A metal that is smashed out so thin that it can become semi-transparent. And so, of course, it's very easy for it to be beaten over dense woods. And so that's what they did to make these shields. And Reuben talked about it when we were, talking about the building of the temple. But this is like just an armory with decorations. Using 600 shekels of gold on each large shield. Verse 17, he made 300 small shields of beaten gold, using 3 minas of gold on each shield. And the king put them in the house of the timber of Lebanon. So that was that, the palace. Moreover, the king made a large throne of ivory and overlaid it with fine gold. There were 6 steps to the throne, and a round up to the throne at its back, an armrest on each side of the seat, and 2 lions standing beside the armrest. 12 lions were standing there on the 6 steps on one side of the other. Nothing like it was made for any other kingdom. Now all King Solomon's drinking utensils were of gold, and all the utensils of the house of the timber of Lebanon were of pure gold. None was silver. It was not even considered as amounting to anything in the days of Solomon. When there was silver around, they just like toss it, right? That's insane. It was not considered as amounting to anything in the days of Solomon. Verse 22, for the king had the ships of Tarshish at sea with Hiram ships. Once every 3 years, the ships of Tarshish would come carrying gold and silver, ivory, monkeys, and peacocks. Fun. So King Solomon became greater than all the kings of the earth in wealth and wisdom. And all the earth was seeking the attention of Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put in his heart. And they were bringing everyone a gift, articles of silver and gold, garments, weapons, balsam oil, horses, and mules, so much year by year. The original writer just wrote just so much. Love that. Now Solomon gathered chariots and horsemen. He had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horsemen, and he stationed them in the chariot cities, and 12,000 horsemen. And the king made silver as common as stones in Jerusalem, and he made cedars as plentiful as sycamore trees that are in the lowland. And again, in Israel, not very large trees grow naturally. It's kind of like northern Arizona. If you go to the res, you got these juniper and these cedar trees, and they're about 10 feet tall at the thickest. And it's kind of windy, twisty wood. And one of the reasons the Navajos have their traditional homes are called hogans, which are pretty much an octagon, is because they made log cabins out of the logs they had. And if you just used the logs you had, you would have a very small little house. But by making an octagonal shape, you can increase your house size by using the shorter logs that you have to make with. People that were building log cabins in Central California can make giant houses out of the giant sequoia trees, right? But for the Navajos, they had to make these octagonal shaped buildings to live in. And so maximum, capacity with logs. And that's why, because they're so small. It's the same in Israel. Can't do much with the logs that are there. So you import these cedars from Lebanon that are very tall and strong and straight. And so it's a rich man's privilege to have something built with cedar, and he makes it as plentiful as the native trees there. As far as like, they're not growing there because they can't grow there, but they're as plentiful because they're everywhere. The Home Depot's stocked with them, right?
Bringing them in with such supply.
Basically, yeah. So that's just an interesting thought. Let's just talk about all that for a minute. So these shields made beautiful displays in the house of the forest of Lebanon, but these were just for looks, right? Because gold is too heavy and too soft to be used as a metal for effective shields. Gold's like almost as heavy as lead, right? And basically almost as squishy, right? And so it's not going to stop much. This shows that Solomon had the image of a warrior king, but without the substance. So each large shield, just so you guys know what it's worth, I nerd out and did the math. Each large shield is worth about $470,000. Each one, just with the gold. And that's at 2024 values. So all those shields together, just in the shields, $94,600,000, just in the large shields.
So one of those is 470,000.
473,000. Yeah, you stole one of those, you could buy a house in Idaho right now.
Yeah, no kidding. Barely.
But trade a shield for a house. That's just a wild thought, right? And then the smaller shields are worth 110 grand each in gold. And so together that's 33 million. So altogether, just in shields for decoration, $124,600,000 in just decorative shields. Just those particular decorations. It's wild.
So here's a piece for you. My Bible app has a side note that says that a talent is approximately 63 pounds.
Mhm.
So 63-pound block of gold.
Mhm.
Okay.
666 of those, 25 tons of gold. It's crazy. Yeah.
25 tons per year. That's
Yeah. That's just his base wage.
yeah, and
It's crazy. It's insane. So then it says,
That much money just
yeah,
poof,
yeah,
blows my mind.
yeah. Not one was silver, for this was accounted as nothing in the days of Solomon. This is the statement of wealth, guys.
Wait.
If taken seriously, this shows just the ridiculous abundance of Solomon's kingdom. King Solomon far surpassed all the kings of earth in riches and wisdom, and the promises of Deuteronomy 28, check this out, to Israel were fulfilled in his reign. It says, Deuteronomy 28:12, the Lord will open to you his good treasure, the heavens, to give the rain to your land in its season, to bless all the work of your hand. You shall lend to many nations, but you shall not need to borrow. That's fulfilled in Solomon's reign in Israel. And then it says, now all the earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put in his heart. This is another fulfillment of promises of Deuteronomy 28. Verse 13, the next verse in Deuteronomy says, and the Lord will make you the head and not the tail. You shall be above only and not beneath, if you heed the commandments of the Lord your God. And then it says, Solomon gathered chariots and horsemen, and he had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horsemen. So in comparison to the time of David, there were very few military conflicts during the reign of Solomon, like almost none. But he still saw the importance of a strong defense. But again, hey, maybe that's why there were few military conflicts, because he had a strong defense, right? You got an intimidating enough stance, you may never have to fight. Pretty cool fact, just for fun, nerdy stuff. Remains of Solomon's fortress and stables are still in Megiddo today. If you go to Tel Megiddo, just outside of the Valley of Jezreel, in southwestern Israel, you can still go and see that stuff. And there you will find tons of mangers or food troughs carved from stone, which 98% likely Jesus was placed in one like that. Because most of the carpenters in Jesus's day worked more with stone than they did with wood. Because again, wood wasn't crazy plentiful in Israel. So they did work with wood, but most stuff was done with stone. And so when I got to see these, there was tons of mangers or food troughs, and they look like a little cradle, but it's for food for animals. But that's why it works out. You throw some straw in there, and it's not a bad place to lay a baby if you're broke, Anyway, just it's cool to know that there's still remains of his stables and fortress in that area, and that's a very strategic area where lots of battles have happened. And again, if you're into Bible prophecy, where there's still one yet to happen. It's called Armageddon. It's kind of a bad translation into English of just the Valley of Megiddo. It sounds fun because we've attributed so much to it, but and again, it says the king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones. And Israel is a very stony country, very rocky country. There's like stones everywhere. You guys okay? Everything? There's some kind of a smirk.
I'm getting picked on.
Oh,
But
is that why you moved?
I'm trying to
move
focus.
seats?
Yes.
Yeah, good boy.
But I thought.
Wow.
Do we
Okay.
need you girls to go?
Country. They were
Oh.
stone.
They are a
Oh,
very
for-
stone country. Okay. Chandra, I didn't know that having you in class would be a distraction. Just kidding. It's fine.
That's
Well,
what I
I
was
know where
laughing
somebody's
about.
brain
Just
was.
teasing. Just teasing. So again, when we think about Solomon's great wealth, we do have to kind of remember, and this is where we got to give him some credit. He didn't originally try to get rich, right? If you guys remember, on purpose, he asks for wisdom alone to lead the people. He doesn't say, make me wealthy, powerful, make me 6'1" or whatever, he doesn't ask for that. He asks for wisdom, because it's way better than anything else we could ever ask for, right? And God promised to also, he's like, because you didn't ask for riches and fame, I'm going to give you that anyway. And God fulfilled his promise. And also worth noting is Solomon gave a solid testimony to the emptiness of riches as he took the place of the preacher in the book of Ecclesiastes. If you guys remember, he writes Ecclesiastes kind of later in his life, after all of his riches and women and fame and all the stuff that he did, kind of, fulfilled all of the dreams that humans have for their ultimate, fulfillment. And then he basically mentions in it that money, among other things, is just vanity, just emptiness. He's like, you think that you'd be happier if you had more money. You actually won't. I mean, you might temporarily, but you won't have real lasting joy with money. And fellas, you won't have it with women. And women, you won't have it with men. And, so there's all of those things. I like the smirks that women give when I say stuff like that. They're like, tell me about it. But he powerfully showed that there was no ultimate satisfaction through materialism. And we don't have to be as rich as Solomon to learn the same lesson. And again, that's where Jesus says, blessed are the poor in spirit. And he's talking about humility, but it also implies when you're in humble circumstances, there's a unique blessing that can be had with a kingdom mentality. And it's something you can't experience unless you've gone through some struggles like that. Verse 28 and 29 to finish the chapter, it says, also Solomon's import of horses was from Egypt and Kue, and the king's merchants acquired them from Kue for a price. A chariot was imported from Egypt for 600 shekels of silver, a horse for 150. That's pretty cheap for, the cost of horses. By the same means, they exported them to all the kings of the Hittites and the kings of the Arameans. So he became like a trade broker. So he's like bringing stuff in from Egypt, delivering it over here. He's even making money being a middleman. Like just crazy. But there's kind of a dark note here. At the end of all of this, like this description of his wealth and splendor, this is kind of a dark note, guys, because this was in direct disobedience of Deuteronomy 17, verse 16, which said to the kings of Israel, or of the kings of Israel, but he shall not multiply horses for himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt to multiply horses. For the Lord has said to you, you shall not return that way again. That's a really specific thing that the kings were supposed to do, and he did that exact thing. Again, the writer of First Kings includes this, which would have just been a side note, if not even worth mentioning, when we're talking about all this wealth and everything. Because we're talking about horses that are being traded for shekels of silver. He doesn't even need silver. But why is it brought up? Because, again, the writer knows, the reader should know what Deuteronomy says about the kings of Israel. And here we have only the third king of Israel, and this specific no-no is being committed right here. And so it's kind of like, whoa, look at all, whoa, and then it's like, oh.
Slap.
Oh. Okay, so not so cool, not so good. And I don't know, it's just weird. What are your thoughts on that? Right? Because that's so specific. To me, I'm like, you're making enough money other places. Why do you even need to do that? But it's one of those things. It's like, if you've ever talked to like really wealthy people, that's all they talk about is money and making more money, finding new ways to make more money. It becomes itself an addiction. Itself becomes this, they become preoccupied with it. And, I'm going to do a little investing here, a little investing there. I'm going to see what happens over here. Ooh, this is doing really good right now. And it's weird.
I
But
just think that, you hear stories about people that are very, very wealthy, and I know you hear a lot of stories now about businessmen and politicians and whatever, and there's just doing really unethical things, insider trading and taking bribes from foreign countries and all this kind of stuff. And then you go, well, this person's 82 and they're in bad health and they're still doing that.
yeah,
And it's like,
it's crazy.
it's like, Gollum in his ring is precious.
Yeah.
To protect that even while he's dying.
Yeah, it's
And,
wild.
It so blinds you that you can't even see the total futility and uselessness. You've given up your life for something that now you don't possess, but it possesses you.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, when you think of Solomon and all that wealth. And again, at first, it's like it was that corrupting influence. And of realizing, yeah, first he would tell you, well, this is God's blessing. He gave it to me. I didn't even seek it. But now somewhere along the line, he's seeking it. And you say, wait a minute, if you're just trusting God and he gives you whatever you need, why would you do this? You know what I'm saying? Why
Yeah,
would you?
it's a good
why?
question.
What is it? And you could say somebody could come in, some other powerful king could come in and just destroy you and take it all away. You think that this wealth insulates you, makes you the glory of the world, but it's God.
Yeah.
It's God who's our glory. And we serve Him. He protects us and gives us what we need.
Yeah, it's
That-
true.
That's the basic lesson, and we can be hard on Solomon. And
Well, and the point is
All
for
in
us
the
to
same
learn from it,
direction.
right? And that's the point, is for us to learn. And so, again, we all sometimes low-key as Americans just think, if I just had a whole bunch of money, I could do so much good with it. And then I wouldn't have to worry about this, this, and this. And then I could help all these other people and do all this good stuff and build a foundation. I'm going to build a foundation for kids that can't read good, or whatever. And, and all that stuff that we try to do. But we know, like, if God knew it was a good idea for us to have that money, then he would give it to us, right? And we don't need that. We don't. And we can learn so much here. Well, Adon, and then we'll go over to Greg after that.
The thing I think about is I wonder if he was knowingly doing something he wasn't supposed to, or if it just kind of happened and he didn't know necessarily. Maybe it came up that, I wasn't supposed to do that, but then he was already doing it, so he was like, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, because we all go in the trap of falling into something that we shouldn't be doing.
Yeah. Again, that might explain why he broke such an obvious commandment, right? Like, maybe the importing horses from Egypt, maybe it just started where he was just this trade agent, right? Well, then he starts keeping some for himself. And then that's where it breaks. That's where the temptation came in. He was doing something that was maybe allowed, being a middleman, importing horses to another place, but not keeping them from Egypt specifically. But again, here, and you have to even wonder if that commandment was specifically for Solomon, anticipating that he would do this. Because his first wife was Egyptian, which was allowed if she's a believer, but that's his first wife is an Egyptian, which is really interesting, right? And then it's almost like that Moses was inspired, and Moses was an Egyptian too, if you guys remember. Even his name Moses is Egyptian in origin. It has a Hebrew, correspondent, which is Moshe, but yeah, it's basically an Egyptian name, which means pulled out from the water. It's a good name for him. But yeah, Solomon, it's almost like it was custom. It was a commandment just custom for him. It was like a very specific thing that was like an issue of obedience for God. That was like, what does it even matter, right? But God's like, I'm going to give a specific commandment that, and as far as we can tell, I think he's the only one that did it, because I don't think any other kings even cared about Egyptian horses, But it's just crazy to think about that. And yeah, it probably did. It probably wasn't just like, well, I'm going to do this because I'm awesome. I'm sure it wasn't like that. Most of our rebellion, with God as Christians, as people that know and love God, most of the time it's not anything like that. We're not just like, we don't just wake up one day feeling spicy. And like, you know what, God, I'm just not going to obey you right now. Usually it's very gradual. It's, like he's probably thinking, I'm importing horses from Egypt, but I'm not doing it for myself. I'm not breaking God's command. And that's an example of, total disobedience that starts out with rationalizing. This is probably fine. I'm not doing it. And then pretty soon, you can make pretty good money. These are really nice horses. Oh my gosh, these are so nice. My wife has told me about these. We have that painting of one over the fireplace. I've always wanted one. Let me just get one, And then pretty soon he's got these world famous stables that are full of these horses from Egypt specifically.
I think also too, when you look just beyond the possession of wealth, that what that, you can see what that brought him, and maybe he didn't anticipate that. Now he's got world leaders schmoozing him.
Mm-hmm.
And for a king, your whole thing is in ruling a nation in the world. That's his context. Now you got all the world leaders around him.
And you're the cool guy now.
Yeah, and that's got to be the ultimate. Yeah, it's like the wealth gives you that esteem in the eyes of your peers, which are other kings and queens.
Yeah. And in this, we see this listed directly after his encounter with the Queen of Sheba, right? So he's got a, you know, he's got a matriarch coming in, and she's like, you know, like a matriarch monarch, and she's coming in and she's like, I really need some advice on some stuff. And here's a bunch of gifts, and you're awesome. I've heard good stuff about your God. And he's probably like, okay, cool, yeah. And then he gives the wisdom. She leaves, and maybe he's just kind of like, that felt really good for my ego, you know? And yeah, wow. Well, you know what? The next time I'm at that dinner party of world leaders or whatever, I don't know if he was in some kind of NATO Facebook group or something, but you know what I mean? Like all of a sudden he's got some homies that are from all these other places, and his buddy Hiram that's from that other country. You know, these ships come in from Tarshish, and, you know, it's just really interesting. And it shows you again, the same thing with us. If your life ever changed for the better in an area that you wished, if you got that relationship you wanted, if you got that group of friends you wanted, if you got that money you wanted, that car, if you owned the land, whatever it was, you get what you wanted. Whatever you think it's going to do for you, it's not. And it's not wrong if you're seeking the Lord and you want to buy a house, or if you're seeking the Lord and you want to make some friends. The things themselves aren't necessarily evil, and they're not inherently evil, but our motivation is most of the time what becomes evil. And then the way we go about getting those things can become very evil. And you know what I mean? Like it's what it is. It's what Jesus talks about. It's giving things in exchange for your soul. And Jesus says, let's go beyond Solomon. Let's go beyond. He talked about Solomon a few times. He's like, the flowers dress better than Solomon, even in his best day. Even Solomon's like nicest fit, right? It was not even as pretty as a flower that God made. But he goes, what really are you going to profit? What real benefit are you going to get if you could actually conquer the entire world and be king or queen of the world, but you ended up losing your soul in the process? What would you actually exchange for your soul? This is kind of a misinterpretation of that, along with a little bit of superstition, kind of led to this belief that you could sell your soul to the devil for certain things, which actually is not possible. But you can slowly exchange your soul for a lot of things. Not actually striking a deal with Satan, but by losing character, making compromises, making excuses.
Making less of yourself.
Yeah, and not making God more in your life. You can do the exact same thing. And you can gain a lot. You really can. If character is not any kind of a goal, if loving Jesus is not any kind of a goal, if honoring God is not any kind of a goal, you can actually do pretty well. A lot of us could do a lot better in our lives in ways that we are if we were able to do that. But it's scary, and every single one of us in this room is capable of it. Greg?
So I just kind of want to rewind to a point. You said us as Americans, we kind of low key it, and we say, if I had this, if I had that, that mindset, that process. I really wonder, for all of us in this room, at what point, for me, I've often had the thought, if I could just get to the point where I'm not struggling in life, But the question for me then would be, then what? What do I do next? Do I continue to follow that point beyond where I'm comfortable and not struggling? Or do I You know, do I just sit down and go, okay, I'm not struggling anymore, what next?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question to ask yourself. That's a good question. Yeah. Because again, if we can just get to this next goal, then we're gonna find a new one.
Just like we
And
would
then-
have tribulation.
Yeah,
Bible says.
Yeah.
Money or no money.
yeah. And then at the end of our life, like Tad was saying, we could be 80 years old, still chasing after something that's not gonna last. So like, when does it end?
Yeah, my mother one time said, and she was a godly woman, but we were raised with little and we're always struggling to survive. But she said, you know, one day she just very wistfully said, you know, she says, I know money doesn't buy happiness, but I'd sure love to give it a try.
But there's no coffee.
No. Yeah, and again, when you're in the struggle, it feels like the only thing that would make life better is getting out of the struggle. I'll tell you what, the times I was struggling more, my faith was purer than when I wasn't struggling as much. That's just me. I can't speak for everyone else, but I can tell you myself, my faith was much stronger, much more pure when I was struggling financially, mentally, physically, relationally, emotionally. My faith is so much healthier than when things are good or great. Yeah.
I was thinking about this today, and it was like, God uses the extremes of things because without the extreme, we don't really notice it.
Mhm.
Like God used David, a shepherd boy, whatever, to kill Goliath and become king.
Mhm.
You know, he used Moses, who was literally just tossed away, basically.
Mhm.
Like he uses the bottom of the barrel because
Moses is like a river abortion, basically. Yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah.
he uses the bottom of the barrel because that's what gives him the most glory. And so, like, if you're at the bottom of the barrel, that's when his glory shines
Yeah.
the brightest.
Yeah. And honestly, the more desperate our situation with Jesus in it, the more clearly people are going to see him. More clearly, we're going to experience him. 100%. Yeah. That's really good. Ruben?
I remember, I don't remember exactly where in Joshua, but the Israelites won a battle where the enemy had horses and chariots, and God gave them the command to cut the horses.
Hamstrings.
Yes. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason was because he didn't want his people to depend on horses and chariots, but to depend on him. But here we see Solomon,
Yeah.
Again, like you pointed out in Deuteronomy, it talked about, a king is not to have, this abundance of horses for himself, and then also in Joshua, he's like, no, you're not gonna have horses and chariots, because then you'll take your focus off of me. Right? He says, I need you to focus on me. I will provide. I will win your battle, but you need to rely on me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Agreed.
God won't give it to you, but like Solomon, he didn't have the life of his enemies.
Yeah.
God gave him everything, but it went to his head.
And it could have happened to any of us.
Yeah.
And in small ways, it's happened to some of us and will happen to all of us if we don't pay attention to this and see that this is for us. This is for us. Yeah.
It's funny. Talked about what Tad said about his and what his mom said, about this.
I sure would like to try.
Yeah, I sure would like to try, right?
Mhm.
And I was talking to my brother about, we were talking, we're in tax season, right? And talking to my brother, and he had asked me, when was the last time you got a refund? I was like, man, I don't even know. It's been such a long time, right? But looking at people right now who, man, if I just had a little extra money, right? And they just, not saying everyone does, but a lot of people spend it foolishly, right? They're going out to eat, they're buying the new TV, they're doing this, they're buying that, and all of a sudden they're back to being broke again, right? And it just kind of shows a little bit of the human heart, right? What a little bit of extra money will do,
Mhm.
right? It didn't make you any better, you know, it didn't put you in a better position,
Mhm.
you know, and so.
Yeah.
It's just interesting.
Yeah.
I've got more headache.
Oh, yeah,
before.
100%.
That's why I take $120 for a flat.
Yeah.
I just bought me a spare in a floor jack.
That's what we talked about the whole time we were snowshoeing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super funny. So-
Penny for the world is yet nothing for the soul.
What's that?
Something my great grandmother used to say, a penny for the world is nothing for the soul.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other last thoughts, comments, or questions?
Well, it's just like the man that had all that wealth and what are Matthew, or that you fool, your soul will be required tonight.
Yeah. In that parable, Jesus is talking about the guy who's like, I got money in the bank. I'm good. I'm set. And Jesus is like, no, you're not, bro, because tonight you're dying and you're going to be standing before God. And it did you no good to have money in the bank. You should have been storing treasures in heaven. Scary, scary, scary story. Those are the kind of scary stories Jesus tells at bedtime. Yes.
I'm just saying, when we were in Haiti, and I went there from pastoring up in Bellevue, and you know,
That's a weird
all these-
contrast, right?
Yeah, being around all these filthy rich people up in the Woodward Valley, and you know, I did quite a few funerals for suicides, and surprising them in a small population area with all that wealth. And went to Haiti, and I was thinking about one time, you know, just seeing the plight of people and the poverty and just the lifestyle there, and asked Pastor Joshua one day how many funerals he'd done for suicide. And he'd been pastor there for like 40 years, 2 different churches. And he said, well, looked at me and he says, none. And I said, well, and he knows probably every pastor in this town, 400,000 people. I said, well, how many suicides have you heard of as other pastors done? And he looked at me and he said, none. And here in a country of great poverty and no health care and all these problems of life.
People are just trying to, like, they're struggling to even just stay alive.
But the thing is like with all the things that we equate with having to do with happiness, they don't have, but there's no suicides. Which tells you what about people's contentment with life.
Yeah. And what riches actually get you. They don't get you anything but a new issue.
But the thing is, like, so I came with this idea that that money doesn't buy happiness; it just hides unhappiness.
Can you say that again?
It says the money doesn't buy happiness; it just hides unhappiness.
That's good. That's a good point.
I wear
Solid.
that t-shirt.
Yeah, solid. So guys, let's think about that as we go and even just chew on that stuff a little, maybe even wrestle with the Lord a little bit on that. Not that it's wrong to, you know, ask the boss for a raise, but again, we have to think about all this because if God's the one that gives us everything, which he did give to Solomon, then if we're his children, it's whatever he gives us still belongs to him. We become stewards or managers of his stuff, his time, his people, even his body that you're living in. And when you see things that way, that you're managing for someone else, should give us a little bit more respect for those things and a little bit more perspective for those things. And then we won't hold on to those things so tightly. Because it's more important, the account we're going to give when the owner comes and asks how we're doing, that's more important than the actual stuff itself. That's kind of the idea. That's kind
Don't
of
give
the
your tithe.
well, yeah, that
More
too,
blessed.
but that's not what I was trying
You're
to.
more blessed.
Yeah, we're not one of those churches, but yeah. So cool. Well, let's pray. Father God, thank you so much for your grace, and thank you for how much Noe loves coffee. We just pray, God, you fill us with your grace and your truth, and help us to grab the stuff here with Solomon. And we're going to continue to see more and more stuff. And again, instead of us just dismissing it as, oh, well, Solomon, that guy, realizing it's written for our encouragement and correction. Help us, Lord, not fall into the same traps. And help us, Lord, to be filled with your Holy Spirit, with your grace, and to know your word. And help this dark, dying, spiritually poverty-stricken world, because we have the riches of Jesus that we can share with everyone. Thank you, Lord, for your grace. Thanks for the opportunity. In Jesus' name, amen. Right on, guys. Hugs and high fives. Have a